We welcome from Stanford in California, Russ Feingold, Democrat of Wisconsin, an 18-year veteran of the United States Senate who served on both the Foreign Relations and Judiciary Committees. And Senator, thank you very much for hanging out with us here tonight. Do you find it realistic or insulting that part of the point these House managers have started out with is that not all 100 senators in that sample audience are up on the details of this case, because life goes on, and we saw what a measurable percentage of the American people, how few people relatively, read a document like the Mueller report?
Well, it doesn't concern me. I think this is what the trial is about. It should be a full process where senators are required to sit in those seats Monday through Saturday, according to the rules, and to learn about the case. I can't expect them to be fully conversant with it based on the House. On the other hand, to block the trial from fully happening, to not have documents, to not have witnesses, that is completely irresponsible and against the history of impeachment and against the Constitution. So I'm glad this process is going to take a while. It's a complicated thing to put forward, but they're doing a wonderful job of setting the stage, and hopefully senators will realize they're going to have some witnesses.
I know you have friends and former colleagues in that chamber and a feel for the chamber and the dynamic in there. In your view, do you think it was an environment today where any minds were changed?
Well, I think it's getting harder and harder for those colleagues that I did serve with to just stand by and go along with Mitch McConnell, who is basically pledged to have a trial that is not impartial. And I think it's really bothering them. I can't believe they're not getting some pressure from home, and I can't believe it's not bothering their conscience. I mean, the argument, of course, is so valid that if Trump gets away with this, the first thing he's going to do is try to influence and turn a fraud of the election coming up this year. Why wouldn't he? As soon as the Mueller report fell flat, what did he do? He did this Ukraine deal. Nothing will stop this person unless the United States Senate does its job, and that means at a minimum having a real trial where senators of conscience do what they must do, and that is to consider the evidence. And frankly, I believe somebody with this trail of evidence that we've already seen really does need to be removed from office before he does more harm.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.